Even if you live in a Western country, you must have seen different levels of poverty around you. And while the people you see are obviously poor compared to the society around them, very few people in the Western world fit the definition of extreme poverty. Most people in extreme poverty live in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. Extreme poverty is also known as absolute poverty, as it is defined in terms of what is needed for basic life necessities. In my last video, I said that the international poverty line is $1.25, which it was at the time the Sustainable Development Goals were defined. That number is both outdated and also slightly misleading. It is currently $1.9, but that number is to be adjusted for both inflation and the cost of living in different regions of the world. Unless you're making statistics, the UN's alternative definition is probably both better and easier. Extreme poverty is a condition characterized by severe deprivation of basic human needs, including food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, health, shelter, education, and information. It depends not only on income, but also on access to services. The reasons behind extreme poverty usually have nothing to do with choices made by the individuals experiencing it. It is caused by the circumstances people are living in, through no fault of their own. Conflict and violence can cripple economic growth, destroy assets and livelihoods, and cause unwanted mass migration. Weak and sometimes corrupt institutions are also an important contributor. When a nation is not able to perform the functions of a state, it leads to inequality and often more violence. The first Sustainable Development Goal that the UN has set for the year 2030 has been broken down into 5 targets, and the eradication of extreme poverty is the first one. The second target is to reduce by half the proportion of people living in poverty by national definitions. These definitions are often based on the median income in the country, and is therefore called relative poverty. In the European Union, the poverty line is defined as 60% of the median income in each country. This can be much higher than the international poverty line. Relative poverty takes into account that a fulfilling life depends on the opportunities people have compared to others. Even if you have enough resources to not starve or freeze, you may still be poor if the lack of resources makes it impossible to take an active part of society. The third target is to implement nationally appropriate social protection systems, meaning policies and programs to reduce poverty and vulnerability. Examples include reduced medical fees, subsidies for food, housing, and other services, as well as welfare and social services. Other examples are labor market interventions such as employment counseling and training for the unemployed, and retraining for workers in mass layoffs. Social protection floors are nationally defined basic social security guarantees to ensure that all in need have access to essential healthcare and basic income security. The floors are defined by individual countries, since each country has different institutional capacities, financial resources, political ideologies, and cultural values. The fourth target is to ensure equal rights for all to ownership of land and other property, access to basic services, technology, and economic resources. Basic services include healthcare and education, but also legal services like police and courts, as well as firefighting. Only 30% of the global population has legally registered rights to their land and homes. In addition, women in half the countries in the world are unable to assert equal land and property rights, even if legal protections are in place. According to the World Bank, the most important things African cities can do to create more affordable and livable urban environments are to formalize land markets, clarify property rights, and improve urban planning. Natural disasters are becoming more frequent and destructive, with an increase in economic losses of 49% over the previous decade. For families living in poverty, these damages can be nearly impossible to overcome. That is why the fifth and last target of the first Sustainable Development Goal is to build resilience to both climate-related and other environmental extreme events, as well as economic and social disasters. Globally, agriculture accounts for about 4% of GDP. However, 3 out of 4 people living in poverty rely directly on agriculture and natural resources to survive. Floods and droughts brought on by climate change make it harder to produce food, leading to food shortages and increased prices. This is putting many at risk of hunger. The UN climate panel IPCC predicts that a global temperature increase of 3 to 4 degrees Celsius could result in 330 million people being displaced due to flooding. The World Bank has estimated that between 32 million and 132 million people will be pushed into extreme poverty because of climate change by 2030. Developing countries will suffer the most from the impact of climate change. This is in part because a large portion of the economy is directly affected by natural disasters, but also due to limited institutional and financial capacity to respond to the effects of climate change. And then we have other economic and social disasters, such as diseases. The COVID-19 pandemic is expected to push an additional 71 million more people into extreme poverty. And this isn't the only epidemic haunting developing countries either. However, all is not dark. The contribution of science to end poverty has been significant. One such improvement has been to enable access to safe drinking water and reduce deaths caused by waterborne diseases. The number of people living in extreme poverty globally has declined from 36% in 1990 to less than 10% today. That is an impressive result. Unfortunately, because of recent events, the number of people in extreme poverty is now increasing for the first time in several decades. The rate at which poverty has decreased in the world over many years makes me hopeful that it is actually possible to eradicate extreme poverty. To reach the 5 targets defined by the UN before 2030, though, the effort must be raised. The world is not on track to meet Sustainable Development Goal number 1. If you think the topic of this video is important, consider clicking the like button. That way you're letting YouTube know that this video should be presented to more people just like you. The next video will be about hunger. If that sounds interesting, you might want to subscribe. The video will be out about a month from now. If you want a reminder, just click the bell.